Hello and welcome to this third video in my series on sampling on the Teenage Engineering OPXY. And today I'm going to deal first of all with the multi-sampler instrument, and that's what I've got in focus on the OP at the moment. And you can see there's a keyboard running along the top of the display. Now you need to understand the difference between a one-shot sample and a multi-sample. If I go into a drum instrument, I haven't got the line out to my audio system in at the moment, so this is just going to be my internal speaker on the OPXY. If I go to this instrument, here's the drum. These are all what we call one-shot samples, just one note if you like, and that's very, very straightforward bit of sampling. And if you use the sampler instrument on this, which I've done in the previous couple of videos, again that is just one shot, one sound spread across the keyboard. But the idea of the multi-sampler is something completely different, and the idea here is to sample several notes from an instrument so that you get a more accurate representation of it on the instrument you're sampling to. Now the other day I got my lovely chord zither out, this instrument here, and I sampled some notes on it for use in the OP, and I'm not going to bore you to death going through all of that. I will show you briefly how I did it, and so that you get an idea of what the process is. Now this instrument has got 21 melody notes. They start from here, they're open strings. These strings back here are used for playing chords, but these strings from here upwards towards the OP, these are the melody strings. And I thought, well, there's 21 of those, so I've got 24 notes. I could sample all 21 notes, one, if you like, one string to each note on here. But then I thought, this first note here is a note of A, so I really want that to be on this note of A here. So I decided to not worry about these first few notes and sample from here to the end of the instrument, so that the A would be here, and then the next note, which is B, would be here. On this chart you can see the notes that I sampled. The A at the bottom was this A here, and then I sampled B, and then C, and then D. Get the idea. F, G, A sharp, B, C, D and E, the first 13 of these open strings. I didn't worry about the ones further up, so they're crossed out in red, but that gave me 13 samples. And the idea is, if you have a note on this keyboard that hasn't got a sample attached to it, it looks to the next one up and kind of pitches it down. So this note of A here, when I sampled it, these notes underneath that didn't have samples attached to them, they use this sample and just pitch it down, and it works pretty well actually. Obviously ideally you'd want one note per string, but I wanted the A to be the A on here, I wanted the B on here to be the B on here, you get the idea. So that's what I set out to do. I will show you the process. I'm only going to do one, I'm not going to do the whole lot because I've already done this. I don't want, like I say, I don't want to bore you to death with it. So the idea is, I'm going to play this note of A, I'm going to sample it onto this A note on the OPXY. Now if I press the sample button up here, you can see that the mic is working. I've set the threshold really, really low so that it'll pick up really quickly. It doesn't have to be that loud because it's not a loud instrument. Now you remember that the sample length is 20 seconds, and luckily these notes take about 20 seconds to ring and fade out. Now with this sampler you press M1 where the red dot is, press and hold it while the note is being sampled. Obviously because I'm using the mic here I've got to be very careful. The other day when I was doing this, my dog decided to get her squeaky toy out, so I had to go and relieve her of that before I was able to do any sampling, because you do need complete peace and quiet. Once you play the note you've got to come away from the instrument and remain really, really quiet while the note is ringing, and that's pretty hard to do, but I managed to do it, as you will see in a while. So let's just do this. So I'm going to press this note here where I want the sample to be. I'm going to have my finger ready on M1 and I'm going to sample this note of A. So there's our 20-second sample. Now if I play this key here, this A key, you can hear it's sampled that note, but there's quite a gap before it comes in. So to trim this sample up, I'm going to turn the dark grey encoder to the right. Now when I play the key, it's too far. Here it's lost all its attack. Now if I click the top of this, I'll get in really tight on the sample. So, still not quite right, but you get the idea. So I obviously did that for all 13 strings that I sampled. I trimmed up all the samples. I sorted out all the relative volumes. You can change the volume by holding shift and turning the white encoder. I've shown you this in previous videos. And I matched up all the volumes of the 13 keys I used. For most of the notes I had to just tweak the tuning somewhat, so you get the start point of each sample right and the volume matched and the tuning, and then you've got a multi-sample. So I'm just going to rejig things here so I can show you that in a bit more detail. So like I say, I sampled those 13 notes, those 13 open strings on my zither, and then I had them on my machine, on my OPXY, in this song that I've called appropriately Zither. And I'm going to play you those notes now, and you can hear that they're pretty much in tune. The notes on the zither anyway are a bit of a strange concoction of harmonics, but these are the notes that I actually sample. So each one of these is a separate sample. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A sharp, B, C, D and E. So each one of those is a separate sample, and you can hear that clearly because that note there has got quite a dull timbre compared to that one. And that is so on the instrument because this is a wound string. Each string has got its own kind of sound, and that's the joy of multi-sampling. And if you want a copy of these samples, get in touch and I'll put them on my Dropbox for you. So what happens about notes that don't have samples attached to them? So for instance, I didn't put a sample on any of these 4 keys. What they do is they look at this sample, this A, and they just retune it. So if I drop down, you can hear clearly, can't you? So these notes all use this sample. It's perfectly acceptable. They've just got the same timbre. They don't have their own unique timbre like the other ones do. This note here, this note of A sharp or B flat, doesn't have its own sample, so it uses this one. So this note of B has got its own sample attached to it, and this note of B flat or A sharp is the same sample, but the OP just tunes it down a semitone, and it works really well, doesn't it? So if a key doesn't have a sample attached to it, then it simply looks for the nearest one above and retunes it. If I just press this, and if you look at the keyboard at the top, it's very small, I know, but you'll see the relative samples. So there's the A, and you can see, so the top note that's showing in this keyboard is the A that I sampled it to, so any notes below that are going to use that sample. If I come up to the next note I sampled, okay, that was the B, and it's going to take care of the B and the B flat. The C is going to take care of the C, and that's it because that had its own sample. So if I play this note here and this note here, you can see they're attached to the same sample. I'm sure you get the idea. So it's a really brilliant thing. I've had some samplers in the past that actually don't do multi-sampling very well, but this really does. It's very impressive, and what you're left with is something very playable with a lovely sound. And so my beautiful chord zither, I can now play this and record it using my OPXY. Obviously you've got to make sure that the start point of the sample is exactly right, so that when you press the key, the note comes in straight away, because otherwise you're going to have problems when you go to record it. And if it isn't right, you can always trim up the sample afterwards. And obviously you can do all the usual things. You can go into the mixer and you can turn up the delay or the reverb. So it's quite a mouth-watering prospect to think that all the instruments in your studio or anything around your house that's got a lovely sound, that's got lots of notes, you can multi-sample it using the multi-sampler instrument on the OPXY, and you can have a fair representation of that sound on this instrument. I checked using the MTP, where you get the samples up on your computer, and the file size of each sample is anything up to 1.6 megabytes, so potentially just this preset alone could be around 40 megabytes. But it's not really a problem because this has got 8 gigabyte of RAM, so there's plenty of room for the samples. When you look at the OP on your computer, it's kind of weird because you can find all the samples in the user/samples folder and in the preset snapshots folder. So that's a bit strange. I don't know why it doubles them up, but it does. So like I said, having made the samples, those separate 13 notes, I adjusted the start point, the loop type, because they often come in as loop forever, which you don't want, so I turned that loop type off. Adjusted the volume, I tweaked the tuning of each sample. The notes were definitely out of tune straight after being sampled. Not quite sure why that was. Maybe I didn't clear that patch out before I started sampling. Maybe it still had some parameters attached to it. But anyway, it's not hard to do. Now, one weird thing I had was when I changed to another instrument. So if I go to the drum instrument, what I found the other day was that the sample dropped down a semitone, and it was driving me nuts. It was fine while I was on the actual instrument. So if I played a note here and changed instrument, you could hear it drop down a semitone. I did a little sequence on here and you'll hear it now. So I'm on the drum instrument at the moment. Here's the zither instrument. Now when I change to another track like that, that's fine at the moment, but the other day it was dropping down the semitone, and I found out on the internet what was wrong. It's to do with the pitch bend, this thing in the front which you can't see very well at the moment. It kind of gets stuck, and the way around it is you press COM, you go to system, you drop down to pitch bend, and you can see it says calibrate, and what you have to do is you press the left side of the pitch bender, release, that's the left, now do the right, release, it's calibrating and it's done. So if you find you've got problems with the pitch bend or the pitch changing when you change from one track to another, that's what it is. So what you need to do first of all is hold M2 and shift, and you can see the pitch bend is set off at the moment, and using the light grey encoder you can change that. Now the other day mine was set to octave. If this is set to octave, rotate that to the left till it says off, then you do the calibration. So you do that in COM, system, pitch bend, goes through that thing I showed you earlier. Once you've done that, you can come back to this, then you can turn your pitch bend up to what you want it to be. I have mine on 2 semitones, a tone if you like. So yeah, so hopefully that's working fine, and if I drop to another track, it's all good. So it was a bit disconcerting, but I'm glad I found that on the internet. And obviously if you want to save this preset, you hold the instrument down like this, you press save. I won't do it because I've already done this, and then you'll see the little spinning disc graphic. It will then save as a snapshot, and then you can rename it. Now the font they use is unbelievably small. I actually had to use a magnifying glass to change the name of the preset. So there we are. That is multi-sampling on the OPXY, and it's brilliant, isn't it? So the last item on the list of things to deal with concerning sampling on the OPXY is the use of loops. Right, I'm going to load in a different song here and press load. It's a lovely sound, that, isn't it? Right, now on the drum track here I've got some normal sounds, but here I've got a loop and I've got the same loop here, a different part of it, but all the other keys have got normal drum sounds. There might be another sample up here somewhere. Yes, there's another part of that same sample. So what I did was I wanted to find a nice Fender Rhodes loop. So if I go into my computer here, so these are my own personal samples that I'm using on the OPXY so far, and this was the sample I used, Rhodes Dust B flat major, 115 beats per minute. So if I just play this, yeah, it's actually 4 bars, isn't it? Anyway, that was a sample I really liked. Now, I don't think the OPXY does time stretching as far as I know. Not at the moment. So what I did was I looked at the BPM, and when I went to the metronome, I made sure I set the metronome to the same thing so that the project was running at the same tempo as the sample, the main sample I was using. I know it's a bit like putting the cart before the horse, but I find this is the best way. Now, I was a bit clever here. I used the drum instrument to bring this sample in on this key here. And the whole sample is on that. Let's mute the other tracks, shall we? Now in here, this track has got that sample, but it's also got a kick drum and a hi-hat as well. So I used this track to play the sample and some drum sounds as well. So it's kind of being very economical with my tracks. So if I just play it again. Now the way that I brought this sample in to this key was I pressed this key, obviously, and I held shift and sample. I looked for the sample, there it is. You can see it's already assigned to that, but obviously if it hadn't been, you know, I'd have scrolled to that sample and brought it in on this key, and once you press that key it will play the whole sample like I've shown you. But if I look at the bar, as far as the OP is concerned, this is 2 bars. So this is playing the whole sample. So I put a trig on the first step here, and I held that down, and I held this 16th step down so that that played for a whole bar. Alright, now I put the same sample on this key here, but you can see what I've done. I changed the start and end points so it played the second part of the sample. So this is playing the first part of the sample, this is playing the second part of the sample. And so on the first bar of the pattern we've got this, but when we go to the, not sure I can show you this, but when it goes to the second bar, it plays this part of the sample. So you put different trigs in for different parts of the sample. So I'm using the same sample and I kind of chopped it up so I could use it in different bars, and it works pretty well. Because this is a drum instrument, of course there's no loop If I look at the top right hand corner, you've got the arrow there and there as well, so it plays the whole sample once the key is pressed down. And of course, having the trig on the beginning of the bar and then pressing the one on the end while holding onto this one, you get the whole bar of that sample. If the loop isn't playing perfectly in time, you can always trim it up a little bit, but like I say, there's no time stretching as far as I know. Now I've got a few different tracks on this, so I'll play a little bit more of this. There's a different part of the sample. But if I put the other tracks in, so I've unmuted those tracks now, and we'll just play this and play some different patterns on this. So we'll play pattern 1. And by the way, on track 2, I've got some other drum sounds, so I used track 2 for especially that sound there with loads of reverb on it. So let's just run this with pattern 1 on this. I'll change it to pattern 2. Pattern 3. Go back to pattern 1. Some different patterns on track 2, those drums. We'll change those. It's pattern 1 at the moment, it's pattern 2. And I think pattern 3 is empty, so there's no extras there. And obviously track 3 is the bass. I've used a different bass here, I've used valves. It's nice though, isn't it? It's a dissolve synth. So the whole point here is that I found a loop that I really liked and I brought it in and I chopped it up as best I could, and it's a really good way of building up a track, isn't it? Unfortunately, with this sort of situation with a sampled chord sequence, the brain doesn't work. I'll show you. Okay, so I'm going to put the brain on. I'm going to press some different keys, but you'll hear it doesn't work. So running normally. It's a mess, isn't it? So let's create a new song. So brand new song here. And I've got a sample on here. So let's use the drum instrument, that's fine. I've got a sample here which I can use. Shift and sample button. And it's in, I think it might be in Les's samples. Here it is, it's this one here. Now if I show you this in my folder on the computer, this is 110 acid jazz anyone, so it's obviously 110 beats per minute, and it is a drum beat, it's a drum loop. So I could put a trig here. Now if I do that, let's turn the metronome off. This is always on by default with a new song. All it does is play the first part of the sample, so to hear the whole beat I press the first trig and the last one. Now it's not running correctly because this is a new project, it's set to 120. So I turn this down to 110, the same tempo as the sample. Now it runs perfectly. But supposing I didn't want to have that sample like that, Is there a way of chopping it up like you can on an octatrack, for instance? There is a way around this. So there's my sample. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the same sample into other keys. So I've got the same sample, that same loop on those 8 keys there. So what I can do then is go to the first key. Let's just press 1 again so we see the sample. This is a mono sample. And what I can do here is I can just trim this up. So if I bring the endpoint all the way back using the light grey encoder, so I just get the kick drum, the very first part of the sample. So if I press this, now the loop point is set to repeat. We don't want that, so I need to change that. So now I've just got the kick drum, that's all I get. This key is still playing the whole thing, so I want the next part of the sample. I'm going to rotate the mid-grey encoder so I get the snare, and I'm going to bring the light grey back so I've just got that snare. It's a bit tedious. It'd be great if you could auto slice this, wouldn't it? So I've got kick drum and snare drum. So this playing the whole thing. Let's find another part of the sample we want to use. I don't know, maybe that very small part of the sample. Maybe bring it up a bit. It's a bit quiet, isn't it? So let's just use those 3 as an example. So I've got 3 samples. So to all intents and purposes, this is just a normal drum kit, and I've got these 3 keys playing different sounds. I'm going to just get rid of this, what's on here. So there's nothing in the sequencer. Now, if we go to the metronome, turn it on, I should be able to sequence those drum sounds in. Turn the metronome off. Now the snare's a bit off, isn't it? Because if I go to it, I need to trim the sample up a bit. Okay, it sounds a bit strange, I know. It's not perhaps the best example I could give. I'm not very expert at this, as you can see, but you can see the point there. You can get a normal drum loop up, and then you can reorder the sounds of that drum loop. You can then record them in as a completely different sequence. Should we do one more? So here's the whole sample on this. Let's find another part of the sample. Maybe, what's that? Good fun this, I like doing this. And maybe we could reverse that. Let's reverse that. So I could put that in. So I put that reverse part of that sample into that sequence. It's rather good, isn't it? So that's the closest you can get at the moment to slicing beats up. So hopefully in a future update we might get normal slicing like you get on things like the octatrack. So hopefully now I've covered just about everything on sampling on the OPXY, although I'm sure somebody will think of something that I've missed. If you think I've missed anything, please get in touch with me and I'll certainly try and cover it for you if I can. I've really enjoyed doing this 3 video series. I've learnt an awful lot about the machine myself, and I think you'll agree it's loads of fun, isn't it? So anyway, that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you got some value out of it, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel.